We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back continuing our conversation with Peter Schweizer. It seems to me, I'm a big fan of political books in general, but it seems to me that they fall into two categories. They're either the sycophantic or fluff piece memoirs that we see, whether written by the individual or somebody else, or they're the type of books that push tough realities, and there doesn't seem to be a middle ground. Now, you're firmly in the latter camp with your writings, but why is it that there's no real middle ground, and that all political books tend to be at one edge or another?
It's a great question. I think part of it is the book business in general is struggling. I mean, this is the subject of a lot of conversation. People aren't buying as many books as they did before, partly because there's so much information available for free online. So I think what that means is a book that is sort of, let's say, a balanced history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Generally speaking, people can get a lot of that information online. So what people are looking for in books, I think, is either in the first order of things, maybe as a show of support for a political figure. Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump comes out with a book. I want to buy it. It's my vote of confidence. Or they're expecting from a political book something that really takes them a place that they have not been before. And that's what I really try to do with my books. There are some what I call Google books out there where people just do basic research and they kind of slap something together. I believe that readers these days expect more. If they're going to plunk down $20 to $30 for a book, you've got to give them something they're not getting anywhere else. And of course, that means you have to do a lot of research. It's a lot of work, which is what I love to do anyway. But that's why I think the book business is fragmenting in this way when it comes to political books, and sort of general histories just don't sell anymore.
You know what? I think you've really got that right, because there tends to be the books on, for example, hard political truth, that they do tend to develop a following, and you see that they gain like a social media life of their own, and then the biographies. This is just a personal observation, but a Michelle Obama, a Hillary Clinton, after they've been out for 1 week to great fanfare, I see them in the discount rack with 50% off or a third of the price, and nobody's buying those ones, but everybody's still buying these. You're at New York Times #1 bestseller, and of course the Clinton and Obama biographies are as well. But seeing as they're in the discount rack after half a week, it maybe makes a little suspicion there. But I think that people semi-believe the idea that an attention span is a short thing among readers and consumers of news, that they aim for is 280 characters, or they only read the headlines. And I don't think that's true anymore. I think when there's good content to be had, people invest their money, of course, their $20, $30, their time and their interest, because we see this a lot in the long form podcasts that are coming out, that people sit down for 3 or 4 hours to listen to. Joe Rogan, for example, or Dan Carlin's Hardcore Histories. If you haven't heard them, they're great, but they're 5 hours of your time, and they're amazing. I think the market underestimates the emotional and intellectual investment people are willing to make in big ideas. Now, let's talk about another big idea quickly, if we may. You are part of the Government Accountability Initiative, the GAI. Care to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, formed this in 2012, and really our focus is to expose cronyism and corruption in Washington, D.C. And my view on this is pretty simple, and that is we have to understand that government essentially operates like a private market. Meaning that people in government are incentivized to carry out certain policies that could be benefit to them personally or to their sponsors. So we try to dissect that and explain why, for example, there seems to be such little reform that happens in Washington, D.C. A lot of the blame is always placed on sort of outside forces like lobbyists. But at the end of the day, it's political actors themselves. And I think it's part of the business model. It's kind of an extortive business model, because if they got a lot of things done in Washington, D.C., it makes them actually less useful and is less profitable as it way. Inefficiency, division, and gridlock is actually good for the industry of Washington, D.C. I think it also explains why sometimes very logical conclusions are not reached. In the blood money book, for example, it seems like it would be obvious that our national leaders would want to call attention to actions by foreign actors that are killing Americans, but there are financial incentives at play in terms of your personal viability politically, your ability to make income down the road. Let's not forget, for example, that when it comes to TikTok, the app and the debate about banning that app, there are actually 6 former U.S. senators that are being paid by ByteDance, the parent company, to lobby on behalf of that ban. If you're an elected official in Washington, D.C., you know that. And you know that if you take certain policy positions, it may limit your ability to make money when you leave political office. So GAI, we do a lot of forensic research. We use no anonymous sources. It is follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. And we focus on these sort of deep dive investigative projects. We were the first ones to expose insider trading on the stock market by members of Congress. We exposed a lot of the corruption around the Clintons in 2015 with the book Clinton Cash. We were the first ones to break the story about the Biden family's financial ties to Ukraine and China. And this all comes from sort of follow the money, in-depth forensic research. So we're very excited about what we do, and we hope to continue to do it for many years.
This is Peter Schweizer, author of new book, Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. Peter, if you could tell our audience where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter X at Peter Schweizer, or you can go to the Government Accountability Institute, just Google that name. And you can also find our podcast called The Drill Down, wherever great podcasts can be located. So we'd welcome people subscribing to that as well.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
And that's about all we have time for on today's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I've been your host, Mark Angelides. I'd like to thank our guests, Scott Cosenza and author Peter Schweizer, for their time and trouble. And also thank you, the listeners at home, for taking the time to tune in and join us each and every week. I'd like to leave you with a parting shot on gaslighting. Now, gaslighting has been defined as a form of psychological abuse and manipulation in which the abuser attempts to sow self-doubt and confusion in the victim's mind. And it seems to me that this heady manipulation is taking place just about everywhere, whether that's political pundits and lawmakers spreading blatantly false narratives over Supreme Court decisions, or whether it's the national leadership telling us we're not engaged in a new Cold War when plenty of evidence points to the contrary. Gaslit? Well, perhaps that's the right word for what's happening today. But remember, friends, the best antidote to propaganda, and indeed for gaslighting, is to know the actual truth. I want to thank you for listening. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.